All right, I think we are good to go. We are live. Collin, welcome to our show, I guess.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
I know, so we put this together. I was asking you to do this, obviously, and figure we can get the eternal Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV debate out in the open. We can start with what we agree with, I guess, right? So
yeah, sure.
Just for as far as I'm concerned, BTC is as far away from Bitcoin as I care about. I know that you did that great video at the Lightning Network, for example. It is not really a scaling solution as far as I'm concerned. I mean, is there anything else we need to say about BTC before we?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess kind of from a very, very high level overview, we have 3 Bitcoins now. And I classify Bitcoins that are still on the SHA-256 algorithm. And BTC is obviously like what we forked off from in August of, almost 2 years now. And I mean, I think everybody watching here could know it's the small blocks really killed it. And the Lightning Network is not a scaling solution. Although I think, at least as far as I'm concerned, I think it's like decently cool tech. I'm not saying like it's amazing and we should focus everything onto it, but I think that it does have its applications. But again, it's not a scaling solution. So yeah, I mean, we can talk about BTC's shit all day, but I think it's definitely been done over and over again.
Yeah. So I guess let's move on then. And so you seem to not like Bitcoin SV at all. So I guess I'll give you your open platform. Why do you not like Bitcoin SV?
Sure. So I guess it kind of goes back. So when Bitcoin Cash really forked from BTC, the community felt very together, I should say. And everybody was kind of doing the whole like, fuck all the small blockers. And you'd see these people who were very hoorah, like very, very extreme almost in positions. Especially when things like SegWit, for example, and how it like was the worst thing ever. And like, obviously I don't like agree with SegWit, but I think like its negatives are blown way out of proportion, and just other things like that, and saying extreme big blocks. But anyways, it all kind of came to the big disagreement when the BSV fork happened. And from my view, it was very centered around Craig Wright and a lot of people that kind of follow his teachings, and then everybody else. And so, yeah, the around fork time, it was very, very messy from a community standpoint, and I mean, and from a protocol level standpoint as well. There was no replay protection put in because people were doing their little hash war, even though they were mining on different rule sets. So it wasn't really a hash war; it was more of like a dick measuring contest, is what I call it. And so it was a very narrative driven fork. Not that it was very narrative driven. Not that like I don't not like BSV. The protocol is just I don't like what it's almost like representing, and I don't think it's trying to be peer-to-peer cash, which is really what I think Bitcoin's supposed to be. And so I think it's kind of skirting more towards the Metanet, and that's kind of what they're really focusing on now. And I don't think Bitcoin is made to be a storage solution by any means. So that's my very high-level overview of that. So
okay, I guess there's a few things in there that we could go on about, but maybe I guess I'll just say I don't really have anything against Bitcoin Cash by any means. I don't really have I guess so. Let's start with the fork. So you talked about the fork. Obviously that was a whole thing with everyone involved in it. My perspective of what I didn't like about how the fork was handled on the Bitcoin Cash side, the first one off the bat would be that, so really there were 2 disagreements, right? There was the ordering CTOR that was disagreed upon from both sides of the aisle in some capacity. There was the op data sig verify, op check data sig, that was disagreed upon between the 2 aisles. And then there was also disagreement on whether the block size needed to be raised at all. Obviously one side was pushing heavily for that. And I guess lastly, there was also the re-enabling of the 3 opcodes So, all right. So off the bat, so I guess for anyone that doesn't know, Bitcoin Cash did enable check data sig, and they did enable CTOR, or switched to using CTOR.
Yeah, but the disagreement was on data sig verify, not check data sig. And so check data sig made it in and DSV did not. So that's irrelevant.
So I guess I would just say, again, for anyone not listening, then Bitcoin SV decided not to implement those two things, and they decided to increase the block size and then re-enable those 3 opcodes. So historically, what bothers me that no one talks about this really that much is Bitcoin Unlimited voted not to implement CTOR. So from a governance perspective, why was CTOR still enabled when overwhelmingly Bitcoin Unlimited voted not to enable it, right?
So your argument is that ABC is the dictator of the whole protocol, and BU, even though it runs all the nodes, doesn't have a vote, is the kind of thing, is what you're trying to say?
No, I guess I just don't understand. To me, if something is highly contentious, why still include it?
I mean, it was included the miners mined on the block, and so I mean, miners rule at the end of the day, as we all agree, and so it could have been contentious. BU could have done their own BCH BU fork if they really wanted to, but I think we can all kind of agree that democracy itself isn't playing out very well within BU. Because there is disagreement, and we just saw some people actually leave BU because they don't agree with how it works. And so I mean, if we want to go back to CTOR, if we want to talk about the technicals of it, we surely can. But Enchain itself actually funded BU to with their sorry, that's a little bit different. Enchain actually wanted CTOR like a year before the fork, and then they changed their mind on it and used it as a point to disagree upon. And BU didn't want it. I mean, they could have done their own miners, but obviously the miners mined the ABC chain, and here we are now. So
yeah, that's fine. Again, I guess from my perspective, it was if you had to pick two sides, one of them was ironically what was proposed as the okay. Well, let's back up. Okay, because if we're going to start fitting individual points, it'll go over. As far as Bitcoin SV is concerned, all it is again the original protocol. Nothing changed. The only thing that in the last fork that was done differently was the old opcodes were re-enabled, and then the block size was again increased, which you can argue whether or not it needed to be increased, whatever else. But the block size in the release of SV was increased. But then other than that, it's just Bitcoin. That's all it is, right? There's nothing really controversial about what was implemented, when in reality, the two things that were enabled in the Bitcoin Cash chain were controversial, right? Now, yes, did Enchain have something on their website that, said they were going to change the ordering, right? And then potentially look at a new opcode? That was on the website, so I'm not going to dispute that. And I think that that's weird. There's been people that have given reasons for why that occurred, right? But I'm not going to speak for that. But regardless, there were two controversial changes. And then there was the things that were not controversial of, we're going to re-enable simple arithmetic operators that were in the original release of Bitcoin. And then we're just going to increase the block size. Now, the arguments that were made, if you listen to the Bangkok miners meeting, was that there was an infinite block attack. That was essentially the argument against increasing the block size, or even getting rid of the block size, was a theoretical infinite block attack, as if miners couldn't protect themselves from that anyway. As far as a controversial, non-controversial, Bitcoin Cash took the controversial route. They implemented an entirely new opcode, despite, I think Ryan Charles actually forget everyone else's arguments. I think Ryan Charles's arguments were never fully addressed. I saw Manjarian's arguments against the DataSig Verify being a subsidy, but really his arguments were never really addressed very well. And it surprised me, because I thought the same people who were arguing that SegWit was a subsidy didn't really care about Ryan Charles's arguments when it came to DataSig Verify. But regardless, if you have to take one of these two forks as controversial or not controversial, Bitcoin Cash is logically the controversial fork.
Well, there wasn't any controversy until like a couple weeks before the fork, and so I don't think the voices. I mean, you say there's all this controversy, but I just hear it from I mean, essentially the Craig cults. I mean, I'll just say it's a. I mean, you guys are in your Metanet, and I don't think it was like a couple weeks beforehand, and until all these issues were brought up, until the cold lock date, and all of a sudden you have Craig doing his little Bangkok thing, and Calvin saying all the Bitcoin Cash miners agree that BSV is the way to go, and they're like stirring up this controversy, and there was no controversy for. There wasn't, and all of a sudden there was a lot, and so I don't know. You're saying like, yeah, C2R is different than what was before, and yes, it would make Ryan X Charles kind of recode his website, and yes, that's a concern, but we're not at mass adoption stage. So if we're going to do these things like optimize transaction ordering, let's do it sooner than later. And going back to your original protocol thing, like, okay, it's not the original protocol. There's been many changes since 2009. So original protocol at this point is arbitrary. And so if you want the original protocol, put poker back into the Bitcoin thing and back into the protocol. And so as far as controversy, I think a lot of it was really just stirred up. And so,
but hang on, Bitcoin Unlimited voted not to include CTOR. No, a lot of the people that voted no on CTOR and Bitcoin Limited are not part of this Craig cult that you're talking about. So objectively, CTOR was controversial in the group of developers, which really ABC and Bitcoin Limited, the two groups of developers at the time that were building full clients. Bitcoin Unlimited voted pretty overwhelmingly not to implement CTOR. So that is objectively controversial, regardless of any kind of perceived Craig cult or anything like that, right?
Mm-hmm. I guess, but again, hash power votes, and so controversy is whatever. But if you want to talk about it's controversy again, I think this is it's kind of a null point at this point.
Sure.
So.
And again, we have two forks now, so it really doesn't matter. Like you said, hash power did vote, right? And there's now two chains that exist. So regardless, we can probably move past that, I guess. So maybe if we could just, the historical part of it, I guess, what bothers me, I guess, is I just feel like the history is kind of rewritten. Like that's what really bothers me the most is there's all this talk of like ABC was booted from Slack channels. They don't mention that Nchain was booted from the ABC Slack channel the week before, right? There's all these historical pieces of events that like kind of get mixed up as if like,
I mean, like all this, I was like in the room when this first happened because the first like split was with Peter R. and Craig, and it was basically right after the Satoshi Vision conference and whatever was the BCH Slack at the time. And I mean, I think Craig quit himself, and I don't think he was booted. And then I don't know if you want to say booted from channels. I mean, this isn't part of Bitcoin again. I mean, this is this is part of like the social layer, whatever you want to call it. And I mean, it's disagreements, and I mean, you could say part of the decentralization is having different freaking chat rooms. And so I mean, part is rewriting history. It's whoever's perspective you're on at this point. And so who got booted from who got booted from there? Who the fuck cares? And so I mean, honestly, my main concern is that BSV just is not trying to be peer-to-peer cash anymore.
So why not? Let's get to that. So why is BSV not trying to be peer-to-peer cash anymore?
Because they're trying to load their blocks with files. They're trying to be. It has these giant blocks. I mean, you want to say the capitalism. So if you're loading these transactions, if you're loading the blockchain with these files, you essentially have these giant blocks that do take forever to propagate, and it causes a bigger orphan risk. And yes, again, it's a miner's choice, and it's not part of the protocol, the bigger up returns. And again, miners can do what they want, but the BCH miners want to do peer-to-peer cash, and BSV wants to do storage. And so I think that's
why are they separate? Why are they two separate things?
Why are they two separate things?
Why can't I make transactions that are cash transactions, which are small in size, and as long as there's space for larger data transactions, what's the problem?
Because if your blocks are getting orphaned, your transactions aren't going through.
But so that's a part of scaling, right? So like in some capacity, are you worried that the economics of people are just going to use it as a data storage layer instead of using it as cash, and therefore the blocks will be too big and the miners won't be able to keep up with the large blocks? They'll be orphaning blocks. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that a whole point of scaling Bitcoin, that I mean, isn't the whole point of scaling Bitcoin that you can have large blocks without issues?
Well, yes, but then I mean, it gets into the whole node decentralization problem, which I think is really the center for all of the Bitcoin debate, is how easy it is to run a node, right?
Right.
And so I think this is really the most what's the word I'm trying to say? Not convoluted, but easy to kind of interpret different ways is running your own node. And when you have these huge blocks that are, I mean, okay, if you want to be a storage chain, what are you trying to store? Are you trying to store like everything? Like the Metanet's trying to take over the internet. Like, you know how big those blocks are going to have to be? And then at that point, you're just to data centers. Like, let's be real. And so you're fine with that.
Satoshi was fine with that. That's what Satoshi wanted. That's exactly what he said, that it would end up in data centers, right?
Yes, I do know what you're talking about. But once you're getting to that point, I mean, let's be real. I think people should still be able to run their own node if they so choose. And now sound like a Corey, whatever, but I think there is a middle ground here, and I don't think forcing these terabyte blocks is the way to scale, is the way to use peer-to-peer cash, because they're full of videos and photos, and again, you're the data centers, and people should be able to run their own nodes if they want, because it does have benefits to run your own node, such as having your own privacy. You don't have to rely on somebody else to run a node. And if you're down to these couple data centers, it's easy to shut down. I mean, let's be real. Most of the BSV nodes are, I mean, I wouldn't say most, but it's probably fairly centralized right now because of the orphaning risk.
Well, so that's not true. So actually the mempool miners themselves did there's actually a really cool graph. I might be able to find it. It might take a while, but showing all of the miners right now, they're geographically pretty spread out. Geographically, they're America, there's like some in Africa, Europe, and then Asia. So geographically, they're pretty spread out, right? But as far as the centralization, decentralization aspect, so there's two things going on. So number one, can I run my own node, right? So this plays into the storage costs of like, well, there's two things. There's bandwidth and there's storage, right? So the general argument from like in the past of the scaling debate has been that we need, so, you know, in the BTC side of things, we need to have a Raspberry Pi that can run this, and bandwidth wise, we need to, even Luke Jr. says we need to decrease the block size because people in Africa, they don't have the bandwidth to take in 1 megabyte blocks, right? And then also the storage cost of storing all of that. But there's a few general problems with all of that line of thinking that I'm sure you're aware of. But in the case of, okay, so people are going to fill up blocks to terabyte levels because they're going to fill it with videos and photos and all that kind of stuff. Well, today it would cost you an insane amount of money to do that, right? An insane amount of money. If assuming the price per byte doesn't change as of today, and I know Rob has talked about this 800 times and he uses it as an attack method, is it would cost you, 13,000 times more than what it would cost to use Amazon Web Services or any kind of centralized cloud service, right?
It's actually like 2 million, but yeah.
Sure. Fine. But even more of a disincentive for people just to be filling up terabyte blocks tomorrow where I can't run something on my home network, right?
So what's the point of promoting it then?
Well, it's promoting a future vision of that. So it's both, right? It's like, number one, today I can't put a gigabyte file on chain without swiping the money button 8 billion times, and then maybe it'll go through that one service that provides that, right? And I think they cap it at 100 megabytes today, their service of chaining transactions. So it's not even possible to put all that on there, but it's economically disincentivized anyway, right? So there's a few issues going on with, like, in my opinion, in this line of thinking of like, well, I'm not gonna be able to run a node anymore. Okay, so first of all, I can buy terabyte drives for my desktop here relatively cheap. So
Trust me, I know. I have probably 40 terabytes sitting on that table right now.
There you go. Right. So,
but I'm not gonna host anybody else's data without them paying me for it. And if I'm a miner, they're not paying me. So
prune it. So why not prune it?
But then why am I using it as a storage solution if it's easily prunable?
Well, do you need other people's storage, or do you need other people's data? If you don't care about any of this data, why are you using it? Why not just prune all opportune?
Okay, so doesn't everybody do that?
They could. Why not? Yeah, they could.
So then what's the point of storing it on chain?
So it's a great question, right? Because then, so there's two things. So if I wanted to prevent something from being stored on, or I guess from being pruned, I could, push it on the stack inside of a transaction, right? So I could make something, I could make data that has to be stored. I could theoretically do that today with a transaction.
An opportune or what?
Not inside of opportune. No, opportune could be pruned, but I could build a transaction with data inside of it that could essentially not be pruned because the data is needed in order for miners to validate if I spend from that UTXO, right? So there's a way I could do that, but if I store it inside of opportune and it gets pruned, this is a whole economic issue of, okay, so maybe theoretically there ends up being just data storage nodes that say, I'm going to store all opportunes, and maybe I'm going to charge you a small fee to retrieve that. If you're some kind of periphery node in the network that doesn't store all of the blockchain, that wants to access this opportune data.
So how you paying these people? Through the Bitcoin protocol, through some third-party service?
Smart contracts. There's a ton of different ways you could do it. It could just be, so you could end up, so this is where the whole Metanet concept comes in. And this is, for me, so everyone thinks like, there's all these comments that it's just, these ideas are just random technobabble from Craig. And therefore, no one could actually think this stuff, or if you do think this stuff, you're technically illiterate and you're retarded, right? But in reality, so there's this concept of, and I heard this from a guy, Alex Fogel. I'll name drop him because I give him credit for even telling me about this, and I was very impressed that he said this, and that it seemed to be part of this end game in the first place. Is this idea of this Mandela network, where you can have the central core, which would essentially be the densely connected mining nodes. Ryan Charles talked about this over 2 years ago, of locking miners inside of smart contracts with transaction validators, right? And then therefore all miners can have to do is just focus on hashing, and they could just leave transaction validation to some kind of periphery service and be locked in a smart contract with them. So
I mean, that's what miners don't. That's what miners do now. I mean, miners don't have to run a node. They can just like submit a block header to a node. Like they don't run their own nodes already. They don't validate transactions. They just hash. That's all miners do.
If they're part of the pool, sure, but the pool has to do that in some capacity, right? The pool is performing some kind of validation, right?
I mean, the pool. I mean, that's just a node. Yeah.
Yeah.
The pool runs the node. Yeah.
But so the point here being, why do we have to? You could build out a service where maybe I say, I think it's going to be economically profitable for me to run a business that stores every opportune. Because why not? Because why not? I can just buy another hard drive. I'll just keep buying hard drives until I run out of money, essentially. But if I think Bitcoin is going to be the data storage layer of the world, I'm just going to buy a ton of hard drives. Okay. And every time someone wants to access opportune, because maybe the mining nodes decide, I'm going to prune all of opportune because I don't need them. I don't want to have to worry about storing gigabytes of data every day of videos, right? But maybe I run some kind of service that stores all of opportune. I'd say I'm not going to prune anything. So that's my business model, right? I'm now running this service. I'm not going to ever prune opportune. And now I'm going to charge you like a small fee, maybe if you want to take this data from me, for example, right? So just building these markets where you can build markets, so you incentivize this idea of people storing the data, because if it's going to cost me, it's an opportunity cost, right? I'm going to either store this data and hope that someone is going to need it in the future, or I'm going to prune it. But if Moore's law continues to hold, which as far as I can tell, it still is, and this is again what Satoshi talked about multiple times, that Moore's law was in our favor, that as long as Moore's law continues to hold, it's always going to be the opportunity cost of storing that data and keeping it around in case someone wants to take it later is always going to be there, right? So
yeah, I mean, again, we're talking about a peer-to-peer storage system at this point, but like, yeah, this is obviously like a business opportunity, but again, it's down to economics. Is it going to be cheaper than throwing it on Amazon Web Service or and Google Drive? Like, that's pretty much decentralized. Again, I do video work. I have to like back up all my shit, and this storage cost is going to have to drop by a factor of like 10, 100,000. Like it's just use. I mean, if you want a decentralized system, why not just use like storage? Like I just want peer-to-peer cash. So I'm not even like BSVs. Like just that vision of a storage Bitcoin is just nothing I care about at all. And so like I barely even, it doesn't, like, why not just use storage? Again, it's like, it's cheaper. It's not everybody's holding all of the data, and it's so, yeah, sure, it could be a business opportunity to keep all the op returns forever, but it's not peer-to-peer cash.
So then here's the question. So are you against storing data inside of Bitcoin Cash transactions? Are you against increasing the size of op return?
Miners can do whatever the hell they want. So that's on them. If they want to push bigger op returns, they're welcome to, but I don't think they would, because it's just, I mean, it's easily prunable. They're not going to store all that thing on their hard drives. So again, I think Metanet is some vision thing in the future that it still requires a server to look at. You have to like visit some type of viewer to view a photo or video on the chain, and so that right there is a point of third party, you could say. And so yeah, I don't think Metanet is going.
Did you see Bottle that just came out today? Did you see that?
Is that one Unwriter's thing that he repackaged?
No, it's Unwriter's new thing that he just released that allows you to just load content directly from other Bitcoin nodes. So you are bypassing that viewer that you're talking about on the internet, right? So, but you, again, though, you're missing the earlier part of like, why not just use Amazon Web Services, for example? I'm not going to talk about using storage, because I don't actually think storage is anything novel that Bitcoin isn't already on its own. Bitcoin already is this decentralized economic system that allows data storage. That's what it was from the very beginning. Otherwise, why else is there script? Why else was there op return? Why else was all this put into Bitcoin from the very beginning?
Sure, but again, I mean, I always say that I look more at the title of the white paper than, I mean, yeah, obviously the contents are valuable, but I mean, a peer-to-peer cash system. And so the storage is it's just something I don't care about. Again, it's like,
but again, storage
again, I'm coming from like literally, like, I've been a big blocker for freaking ever, but I don't care about putting my videos on a blockchain, because for me to care about it, it has to come down in price like a factor of, like I said, like 100,000 for me to even consider it. And again, if you want to become a Metanet, if you want to host a YouTube on chain, like it needs to be damn near free to throw up a 10-minute video, to have any type of user experience that is even worth talking about to a normie.
So if data storage doesn't impact peer-to-peer cash, then where's the problem, I guess? And not that you have a problem, you're just like, well, I don't really care about any of that, so I'm going to focus on Bitcoin Cash. But I guess from a market, I'm some random person, I'm trying to figure out which one of these things I want to get inside of and get involved in. Where is Bitcoin Cash's value proposition over Bitcoin SVs?
Peer-to-peer cash, you don't have to worry about blocks that crash nodes.
So is Bitcoin never gonna scale past blocks that how else do we scale Bitcoin if we don't push the limits of the blocks that are capable to be propagated against nodes?
Well, if we had a full 32 megabyte block, I think I saw some stats today. If that was full of transactions, which obviously a full block would never happen on Bitcoin Cash, because we originally forked to never have a full block. So the limit will be raised eventually. It's in the ABC roadmap to go to 1 terabyte.
Yep.
And if that's full of paying transactions, that eventually, of course, will take over the block reward. And so Again, it's sorry, my point going back here. If we had full 32 megabyte blocks of transactions, that's 6% of what Visa's capacity is. And so extrapolating that out, I think it'd have to be like half a gigabyte blocks to basically take over Visa. And so again, I'm not against large blocks. I just think if we're putting videos and photos on it, those blocks are going to be fucking terabytes. I mean, they have to be petabytes to even come close to taking a dent in what's uploaded to the internet today. And it's just in a peer-to-peer system, you're not going to be, you can't prune an op return when you're validating a block. And so, yeah.
Why do you not want to bring in these large services inside of Bitcoin? Why would we not want to bring Amazon, Google, all these companies that have the infrastructure of this kind of stuff? Why would we not want to incentivize them to join the Bitcoin network if they are capable of processing these large blocks, for example?
Well, you're down to the biggest internet companies in the world, which can obviously be censored.
But we bring them into a hyper-capitalist system that forces them to compete with other entities.
I mean, they can come in and use it as peer-to-peer cash. I don't care. Again, it's like, this is Bitcoin. It's not Google Drive. It's not Bitcoin Drive. That's a good saying. Bitcoin Drive.
There's an app in there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I guess I just don't get the viewpoint. But that's fine. That's fine if that's because I guess it's just like the inevitable end state of Bitcoin. If you're going to uncap the block size, it's going to be either you keep the transaction size the way it is, or you also allow that to be unbounded. So you seem to be saying we shouldn't unbound the transaction size, but maybe eventually unbound the block size. But then you're saying, well, it's up to miners anyway. But like, I guess that's what I don't understand. What the position of I hate the idea of even calling, like, I absolutely despise the idea of being associated with the community. I don't want to associate you with the community, but I want to figure out, like, all these people that are constantly attacking people like me. I just want to figure out, I'm not saying you do that, but I just want to figure out what the argument against what I believe to be Bitcoin and what I believe to actually be valuable inside of Bitcoin. I want to understand what those arguments are. And I guess, like, if the argument is just, well, it should just be cash, it shouldn't really be this giant data storage layer, then my argument would be, if the whole point of Bitcoin is to be this hyper-capitalist system, why would we ever limit the transaction size? Why would we ever limit the block size? I think we both kind of agree with that. But to limit the transaction size, or to tell people you may or may not do this with your transactions, that's ultimately a miner's decision. Ultimately, of course it is. I think we both, sounds like it's what you keep saying. But why would we not want to encourage that, to make this thing as big as possible and to scale this thing as quickly as possible? That would be my argument, I guess.
Because I don't see, like, advertising Bitcoin as a storage solution as being the way to gain that mainstream adoption.
Sure, I think that's a fine point. I actually disagree. I actually think that in a weird way, I think it's now our only opportunity to provide a value proposition, because I actually think FinTech, we've given them 10 years, and this is all thanks to BTC. 100%. The core developers and everyone that lined up like zombies behind them have allowed FinTech to make, from a user experience level, they've been able to replicate a Bitcoin payment with our current banking infrastructure. Like to most people.
Sorry, I missed most of what you just said. I think it was my internet. You can go back like 10 seconds.
Yeah, I was just saying. I think for the most part, FinTech has caught up to like it used to be like, okay, well, let me send you a Bitcoin payment with my phone, and look at that, it's right there, it's instant, right? And that amazed people. Venmo, Zelle, right? All these other, even every major banking institution allows this kind of instantaneous electronic transfer in some capacity. I think we've actually missed the boat there. I actually think the value proposition is going to be put data into the blockchain. I think that's inherently a value proposition to tell businesses you can load data onto the blockchain. It'll be there for, it's immutable. It's there forever. So now you don't have to worry about keeping records. The records are just there. Record keeping is one of the, it's a very time consuming and it's a very expensive process for just about every major business. So, okay, we've solved that problem for you, number one. Number two, so you have data storage, but then also we can enable the movement of data and also just the general, we're going to enable you to earn money to interact with services, right? And I think you generally agree with that too. That's a valuable thing. But I think there's the second part of, okay, well, there's only a certain amount of time, even Satoshi said, what was it? He said 20 years. He said in 20 years, we'll either have a lot of volume or no volume. There's only so much time we have. So telling a business, hey, by the way, that whole like keeping records around, that thing you probably spend a lot of money doing, we can solve that today inside of Bitcoin. Here's a way to do it. You don't even have to use Bitcoin. You don't have to buy Bitcoin. Maybe a miner will just charge them a fee and guarantee them a certain amount of block space, for example. There's all these different ways around it. So I actually think using Bitcoin as a data storage layer is a great selling point in today's day and age. Otherwise, there's really minimal value proposition, I think, to a lot of businesses, whether they're right or wrong. I think I would agree with you that they're wrong, but to them, they're perceived right about it. That why would I use Bitcoin? I can do instantaneous transfer with my bank today. You can argue all you want. Well, it's permissionless, censorship resistant, all that kind of stuff. But it's like me telling you, well, you can have this immutable decentralized ledger instead of putting it on Amazon Web Services, right? And you're like, well, I don't care. It costs me more money, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's Bitcoin's all about economics, ain't it?
It is, yeah, for sure, for sure.
And so if it's not cheap for me to do compared to what's out there already, what's the point of even trying to do it? And so, like, yeah, sure, you can. It's the blockchain's immutable. So if I want to store an image or validate all these records, I could just hash it out and throw it in an op return, and I don't have to pay all these exorbitant fees. And then I just check the hash back later if I want to make sure my records are right. And so, again, yeah, go ahead.
Should you unbound the transaction size? Yes or no? Are you just going to say that's a miner's decision? But like you philosophically, should Bitcoin be used as an unbounded transaction? Should the size of transactions be unbounded? Yes or no?
It sounds like an attack vector, and so that's probably a miner's choice. Yes.
Okay.
I don't know enough about how the size of an individual transaction would validate or anything like that. So, yeah.
Is there anything on the ABC roadmap you disagree with?
I think Avalanche is something that's definitely controversial because pre-consensus itself is kind of an interesting topic. Because again, miners are end all be all, and if you're trying to make these weak blocks without hash power behind it, what's the point of even having a miner? So I don't agree with that. But again, if we're trying to scale, like I think we both want Bitcoin to scale. I just don't see BSV doing anything to optimize. And I think that will be their ultimate downfall, is that they're not doing anything to optimize. All they're doing is raising the block size. And so within ABC or BCH in general, you have CTOR, which will help very much with graphing, which I think is really like, it's really the key to scaling Bitcoin. One of the huge ones is graphing, helping with that propagation. And so I'm curious if you see anything on BSV's roadmap that's going to actually optimize the protocol.
Yeah, I think parallelization is the number. I mean, Satoshi if you go back to the original commit of Bitcoin, he wrote a comment saying parallelization needed to happen in 2009, and pretty much no work has been done on that. BU did some work on it. But that's the main focus of the N-chain developers. And I spoke with a lot of them when I was in London. I'm not convinced, none of them are convinced. Bitcoin Unlimited wasn't convinced that CTOR actually helps solve a problem. And then number two, you're saying they're not working on optimization, but now again, it's on testnet, but 128 meg blocks day in, day out. Daniel Connolly claims 512 megabyte blocks will be coming really soon. So I guess what would it take for you to be convinced that Bitcoin SV is working on optimizing the protocol?
Well, I'm not really, again, BSV is extremely centralized to begin with. And so even if I'm glad, like, go ahead, push these big blocks, let's see what happens. But I will not rally around something that is basically completely centralized around a company.
But it isn't centralized if anyone is allowed to come in and compete, and nothing has closed off anyone from competing inside of Bitcoin SV.
So what about the developers? I mean, you have N-Chain, who's basically devving it. Calvin, who is funding pretty much everything in BSV, and I don't even want to get into Calvin. I'm sure I could, and I'm sure everybody knows here what I'm talking about. But when you have people like Calvin and Craig who basically run the show, I don't know how anybody can get behind that, no matter what the protocol is saying, because it is centralized. I mean, yeah, testnet is doing these big blocks too, but I mean, where these nodes? Let's see it on mainnet before. Like, I mean, BU has done many of these. BU has been many of these big. They've done gigabyte blocks like on testnets before. So testnet.
So what would it take? What would it take for you to be convinced? Okay, Bitcoin SV is going to scale Bitcoin faster than anything done on Bitcoin Cash. What would it take for you to be convinced of that?
Go ahead, but again, it's centralized, so no thanks.
Okay, but you're saying it's centralized, but in what capacity? You're saying the mining is centralized?
It is at the moment, but that's probably just because they're mining at a loss. But the development, yeah, completely.
So, all right,
and yeah.
Well, I guess there's two things. Number one, development doesn't need to. I agree with you, actually. I actually agree with you that it is pretty much centralized to Enchain. That's not even really up for debate. That's pretty much what's happening, right? Enchain is developing the Bitcoin SV client, right? That is, you could argue that is centralized, right? But if the goal is to make Bitcoin back to the original protocol and then stop changing it, does it really matter? Does it really matter if we get to that goal?
So you just think they're just gonna leave it alone? That's their promise?
Yeah, I think so. I think the goal is to make it a stable protocol. That seems to be the goal of every single person inside of Bitcoin SV. What do you think they're going to change? Do you think they're going to like change the mining reward or something?
I don't know. There's only one client on BSV, so you're at the whims of them at this point. With ABC, there's BU, there's BCHD, there's all these new implementations coming out, and I don't see any of that happening. Why not? Why don't they matter? If ABC and BU go down, why can't I connect to a BCHD node?
So, in the perfect example of this was after the hash war or during the hash war, the Bitcoin ABC client was secretly updated with every single person that mattered, and Bitcoin Unlimited wasn't even told about it. So really, Bitcoin Unlimited really doesn't.
Oh, you want to talk about checkpoints now? Let's do it.
I don't care about checkpoints. We can if you want, but I really don't care. I actually think it's an overblown issue. I think it says a lot about like the plan. Like I think when I was on that stream and Andreas Brecken, his attitude toward it, I think that says a lot. I think the attitude of like, we can control this and we can decide this decision before anything happens. And it was decided long ago. And a small group of people that I don't know anything about, or I don't talk to, they don't communicate with me, but my money is at the whim of their decisions. That bothers the hell out of me, actually. So I think like that is what bothers me. I don't really care that they checkpointed that like, sure, I can get over that. But I
don't know what you're talking about, because the checkpoints were it was not even at protocol level. They were optional based on the node operators. And even if Calvin did it, or Craig did attack the chain, like another one of his false promises, I bet you if the checkpoints were used, there would have been basically another split within BCH. And so saying that your money's at the whims of these people, no, they're at the whims of the miners, which they always are. It's whichever, if the checkpointed version or the non-checkpointed version, whichever one the miners would follow. And so saying that at the whims at a couple people, like, yeah, if you think a couple people are miners, then yeah.
Sure. Well, the root of it, I guess, is because this is the question I want to ask you is, are you, as someone who holds money, so you're holding money, right, in the form of Bitcoin Cash, are you confident that the development choices that are made hand in hand with the miners involved, because that's really the root of it. You're right. Miners activate everything. So let's not conflate the fact that a developer can do whatever they want, but a miner has to run the code, right? That's 100% true. You're right about that. Are you comfortable that a change won't be made to the base underlying protocol in the future that will devalue your money? Because as far as I'm concerned on the Bitcoin SV side, there's a commitment to, we're going to lock the protocol. So now my money is safe. I
thought you were optimizing. Now you're locking it. It can't be both.
The consensus protocol is locked down. Individual miners should be competing to optimize their own software. That's what should be happening. Actually, it shouldn't even.
But there's only one software.
There's one public publicly released software. And
Okay,
then
okay, yeah,
I bet
okay.
CoinGeek runs a different form of software than Mempool does, for example. I bet CoinGeek has their own optimizations to the software, as they should. That is what they should be doing. They shouldn't all be running the same code. That would be stupid. It would be you should be competing. You should be optimizing your software better than other people so that you can process a bigger block and you can take in more fees and then you make more money, right? Isn't that the whole point?
Yeah. Again, you ask if I'm worried about the developers changing something that will devalue my currency, and I could fire that exact same question back to you. So I don't think this is a specific problem to BCH that isn't in BSV.
I disagree, because there's a commitment to not changing the protocol anymore. There's a
well, that's just words. I mean, come on, CoinGeek's all marketing, man. BSV's all marketing.
Yeah, you can just say that, but it's like it's very clearly a commitment from every single application developer, the developers themselves that are working on the client. Like there's a complete commitment to doing that, no matter what you're saying. There is a commitment, and there's publicly available statements to say that. Whereas there's a publicly available record of the other side saying, no, we have more changes to make. We're going to implement more changes. Schnorr signatures, which is fine, whatever that's great. Was that like, if you had a year ago, you wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, next May we're going to implement Schnorr signatures on top of Bitcoin Cash, right? So that's something that's changing, and it's something that there seems to be a commitment to continually change over time, right?
Why would you not want to make the protocol better and better? I mean, it's optimizing versus like what you're saying, BSV is locking down, and then you're saying these devs are still optimizing, but eventually they'll lock it down. And you act like, I mean, if we get to worldwide adoption on BCH, like, yeah, and everything works perfectly, why would you keep optimizing when it works fine?
But it's because, in my opinion, it's because in economics, there's unintended consequences for every decision that you make. Always there's unintended consequences. So how can you ever guarantee that what you would call an optimization, for example, that changes the consensus layer, doesn't have unintended consequences? Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but maybe 5 or 10 years down the road. So my preference would be, how about we try Bitcoin? How about we just try Bitcoin as it was released, where Satoshi Nakamoto said from the very beginning, hey, this thing works. And by the way, it can handle immense scale today. He said that in 2009, right? He said from the very beginning, this thing works, and it works the way it is. So why would we not try that before we start optimizing or introducing things that we think are optimizations or anything like that?
You can, but then you need to go back to the same difficulty algorithm that changes every hour.
Yeah, I agree. That does need to happen. Yeah, it does.
All right. You going to go back to the same difficulty that was when BCH forked?
No, I would prefer the 2016 block adjustment.
No, I mean the actual difficulty value, not the adjustment.
I think the difficulty adjustment I think even Roger said from the very beginning with the Bitcoin Cash fork, it's never sat right with me. Actually, it never has. So
I was talking about like the actual difficulty number, not the algorithm.
I agree, but the difficulty is off because of the adjustments, right? So like to say are we going to go back to the difficulty of August 2017? It's like,
So, I mean, I guess I could say that the original protocol is arbitrary at that point, because there's all these changes, all these bips that were put in. You won't have mnemonics anymore. You won't have any of this stuff because you're back to the original protocol. Like you're going back to legacy addresses now, which is a horrible user experience. I almost accidentally sent somebody like just the other day and sent somebody BCH, but since it was the wrong address type, I didn't send it. And I was like, oh, thank God. And so all these changes that happen to make it better, you're saying you're just going to get rid of them all, or you're just going to pick and choose the ones that you want to go back to the original protocol. That is completely arbitrary.
Cache addresses was one of the worst user experiences I've ever had in my life. The fact that we decided to change the address was one of the worst users. Every single thing I used, whether it was a QR code or I had to type in the address, I would get something back saying this address is invalid, the QR code is invalid. So I think from a user experience perspective, that was stupid. Now,
well, you could swap between them very easily in just like every wallet. So I mean, that was in the very beginning. Obviously,
I had to half the time I had to Google a service to even on a block explorer. If I was on an explorer like Blockchain, I think only needed cache address. If I wanted to, I think they now added in that you could see the legacy address side by side. But Do you want Super Nerd to join? He just asked. He keeps pinging me, asked me if he can join in. Do you want me to bring him on?
Sure, if he wants. I don't care.
All right, I'll throw him in. I think.
Oh boy.
I can't do this all night, but I'm sure you don't want to do this all night either. But shit, I just sent him the YouTube link. That's not going to help him.
Yeah, thinking cash addresses wasn't a good thing. It's funny to me. Why would you not want a new address? You just want to like pretend that you're BTC now, or what?
Well, I believe we are going to be the only Bitcoin that remains. So I don't see the point in changing it when in reality the only people that are really
but you're not now. But you're not. So like the user experience is like you should optimize based on where you are.
I've yet to hear one person that has been caused issues by us using the legacy address. I've yet to hear one person negatively impacted.
And it's because it's a very small community, so you won't have that. But
so maybe I'm not convinced it will ever be an issue. And if it is, I wish I don't know what to say. It's not an issue. It's just 100% not an issue at all. The only people using Bitcoin today are people like you and me, and like to be honest with you, we're not gonna. None of this stuff's gonna matter in the end because we should be building services where people aren't inputting addresses to begin with. So,
sure.
Right.
Oh,
all right. Hello. I don't know your name, so I'll call you Super Nerd, and that's fine.
Yeah, it's just Super. He doesn't have a real name.
James. It's a biblical name. I just want to say I can go all night. I know Connor said he couldn't. I've got another bottle. We could do this.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
Hi, Connor. Nice to see you finally, or meet you.
See you. Yeah. Welcome.
So I'll start off. I'm not going to start by saying anything. I will preface this with both my eardrums are blown out from swimming, but I'm willing to take that one for the team. Heard you guys talking about everything from CTOR to checkpoints, and I thought maybe I'd come in, and if you guys are still talking about this stuff, I'd like to say a few things about it.
Sure. So what are your thoughts? What do you have to say off the bat?
Well, checkpoint specifically, I mean, basically this is just there to protect previous valid economic work, which can be done. It's voluntary. Checkpoints, I know Andreas Brecken, he was pretty upset about it. I think it was just a gut shot because it seems kind of distasteful to add. But if you have the hash, you can undo the checkpoints.
So that's fine. I don't really care about the checkpoint itself. It was more how it went down more than like what they did. But
yeah, when I heard it too, it was like a gut shot. I'm like, why? We didn't need to do this. These guys didn't have the hash. Look, if you guys had the hash today, checkpoints are gone. Everything, you could totally rewrite the last 1,000 blocks if you have the hash. You guys don't have the hash. I heard you guys, you're talking about on these low level ideals, which really aren't. I don't think anyone in this room, I don't think we deal with low level at most times when it comes to Bitcoin. It's more of a high level kind of thing. And when it comes to BSV, it's just not focusing on P2P cash.
So you guys keep saying that. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's the point, because P2P cash is all you need. P2P cash is enough to change the world. That's all. Let's get that right first before saying, hey, look at all the other cool shit I can do. Now we're going to build the internet. We're not ready for that. I mean, there's so many, in my opinion, better and more practical means to reinventing an internet or data storage that can't be messed with. It would be like hardware-driven mesh nets. So there's still plenty to figure out when it comes to that, but the same argument goes for Bitcoin SV. There's so many problems to solve for both of these, but from a decentralized standpoint, a mesh net, hardware-based, would totally destroy BSV. Okay, BSV is just another protocol built on top of the internet we use already. It doesn't even make sense.
So we're going to bring this back then. So the question is, so you believe that the transaction size should remain limited on top of Bitcoin Cash?
I believe the focus, I want to do high level here, right? So I don't want to... No.
Important.
Because, no, I'm going to do high level. If I'm wrong, I'm okay. I'm okay with it. I'll retract anything I say, but I'm going to do high level here instead of going where we walk to a specific tree and argue that tree while the fucking forest is on fire. I'm not going to do that, right? My focus is on P2P cash. I just want P2P, peer-to-peer cash. That's all we need. I don't dislike BSV. I don't know if that, I don't dislike BSV. I don't attack it. You've never seen me personally on any BSV channels. I've seen plenty of BSV guys come into where they know that BCH guys hang out and they want to bait us. And we have a little fun, but you won't catch us approaching you because we don't need to. We understand where we're headed. Yes, that's the way it is.
That is objectively not true, but that's fine. Sure.
It's in my opinion, though.
Sure.
So I've got to say that that's my opinion. I'm not saying that is truth.
So again, though, this
back
is
to your question about blocks being, you know, my focus is on make the blocks as large as need be, according to whether you're going to what's feasible, what's viable, what's Moore's law. Have it focused specifically on peer-to-peer cash transactions. So we haven't even seen how this could change the world yet. We didn't get a chance to because of the everything that happened with BTC switching over to Lightning Network, installing it.
So I agree, but we should be building as many applications as possible to enable the use of peer-to-peer cash. I don't think throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks is the way to go. I think allowing anybody to do whatever they want is the way to go. So
BSV should exist.
Bitcoin should exist, and Bitcoin just allows anybody to send Bitcoin from one person to another, and it also has a scripting system that allows you to build whatever you want with it.
Focused on peer-to-peer cash transactions.
No, I am focused on that. We are all focused on that.
No, I'm not saying focus. I'm saying these things are in focus, in the focus of peer-to-peer cash transactions. Of the same thing as in real life, of me physically handing you a fiat note, handing you cash. That's what this needs to be.
I completely agree. And my focus is on the exact same thing. Everyone in Bitcoin SV's focus is on the exact same thing. We all believe Bitcoin is peer-to-peer cash. It's
hard to believe when you hear the marketing when it comes down to when you see an article on CoinGeek prematurely saying that all miners agree with the BSV or the N-chain plan roadmap for the future, and it ends up being just complete bullshit.
I'm not going to speak for them. Again,
you shouldn't. There's nothing to say.
Okay,
there's nothing you can say about that.
It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. That if you're trying to sell me on a value proposition, Bitcoin Cash over Bitcoin SV, I don't see it.
It's hard to believe when you say that you guys are focused or that you guys have set in stone ideals, because it's been said amongst you guys. It's hard to believe that you guys are even focused on or wouldn't change at some point, just based on the history of things being said that just weren't true. It's all been a marketing stunt ever since the article that came out about all the miners agreeing to BSV roadmap or N-chain roadmap, to walking out from the conference, how that played out, lying about the specifics when it came to why he walked out. The whole thing's just been a marketing stunt.
No, the root problem is that everyone hates Craig Wright. That's the root problem. Is that
I think he's one of the most interesting guys on the internet. He really is. If he could just get his social shit together. I don't know if he's on the spectrum. I wouldn't even want to guess upon that, but he's one of the most interesting guys I've ever seen on the net. However, what he's marketing is not P2P cash, and he tends to speak in absolutes a lot, which often comes with unnecessary consequences. When everything you say is speaking in absolutes and you're defining something in that moment, you could look past. Well, you can't look on his Twitter history now, but you could have looked on his Twitter history in the past and seen tons of contradictions based on this.
Okay, but again, value proposition of Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin SV. The only thing that I've ever heard is that because Craig Wright is associated with Bitcoin SV, therefore it has less of a value proposition than Bitcoin Cash. And then it's just like,
That's how you're seeing it.
your data storage thing is stupid. So your idea of using the chain as a data storage layer is stupid, when that's not the argument. The argument is that anybody should be allowed to use the Bitcoin scripting system however they'd like, and anybody should be allowed to make transactions however they'd like, and as long as they pay for it and a miner accepts it, they don't have to pay for it. A miner can accept
peer-to-peer transaction, right?
Yes. So again,
right. So what does I mean, look, Connor, let's really think about this objectively, right? What company is going to use Google Voice as a backbone for their telephony services and distributing Google Voice phone numbers to their employees or upper level management? What company is not going to be thinking about self-sufficiency? There's no problem for BSV to solve when it comes to data storage. Normal people don't value data storage. You can't. What they value is decentralization, and that's not what BSV is. BSV is a centralized data. It's going to end up being a centralized data storage system.
Why?
A mesh net would be a decentralized internet. If you really want to.
The goal of Bitcoin SV should be to make it as valuable as possible so that other miners are incentivized to compete against the current miners, and therefore you end up with a more decentralized mining ecosystem. That should be
if I'm a miner, what am I pruning and not pruning?
That's entirely up to you. Entirely up to you.
So I'm pruning everything. I just want that reward and the transaction fees.
That's great. That's wonderful.
How far does this go around? How many people have this same ideal?
Maybe eventually it makes sense that every single person hashing decides to prune all opportune data. Maybe that's what makes sense in the end.
What's going to end up happening to build a business model around this? You're going to have what is known as an internet full of tollways. Every step you make has got a token action attributed to it, or a fee, and nobody wants in the land of convenience where people think that Venmo is P2P. Nobody wants this.
But you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of when you talk about libertarian arguments for private roads.
That's Craig Wright's argument about charging for using
I think
the community groups together.
Why would you not want to do that? Why would you not want to have a cost associated with everything? Even if that cost,
I got shit to do. I got shit to do. I don't want to pay 1,000 transactions a day to live. I don't. That's probably too. It's probably above my head. Maybe I'm not smart enough for that. I don't want to have to. I don't want every action I make to be monetized.
Why not? Why
why not?
Listen to me. The reason why that's a good thing is it introduces market forces into data. So hang on. Let me give a whole.
You're rationalizing. You're rationalizing potentials in order to make this thing make sense.
So the argument is like, why would you use Bitcoin as a data storage layer? And my argument would be because we can then associate value with all of information. And the biggest problem today with the internet is that you have an unbounded amount of information that is subsidized by these large companies like Google, Amazon.
Look, there's a thought. I don't mean to cut you off, but there's a thought out there that eventually industry is going to be taken over by automation. And we're going to become a knowledge-based culture, and we're going to value things differently, and how we earn money or how we earn status is going to be different. I can see a future where what you're saying has some sort of play, but that's not the world today. That's probably too far into. So
I'm not going to get into I don't like.
We can stay high level.
I don't like the Andrew Yangers who are talking about UBI today or anything.
Yeah, I don't either. What do you get when you give everyone $1,000? Well, bread's $15 a loaf. It's all relative. It doesn't make a freaking difference, right? Merit is a fundamental.
Yeah. So I'll come in on here. So you're saying about like monetizing all your actions on Metanet, and like maybe that would work if I didn't already pay my ISP, but I already do that. I agree. So then I'm double paying. So is there ever going to? Yeah, go ahead.
We should replace ISPs or bring them into the Bitcoin ecosystem. Is what we should.
That's a whole nother. That is a
very big vision. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's too far. It's like, look, you're talking about hardware mesh nets at that point, Connor. It really, you're gonna. I believe you're gonna end up having the epiphany that this is a hardware mesh net problem. That is looking for the solution.
I think we solved. So all right. So I will give you ammo against me. Okay. Because I will give you my history. So everyone loves to tell me what my history is with my involvement in Bitcoin. Okay. Now I heard about Bitcoin quite a while ago, and I followed all of it. It was back in about 2013, 2014, and I got really into reading about the scaling arguments that were happening back then. Okay. What made me excited again about Bitcoin after I got very disillusioned, especially when I saw all the censorship on Reddit, I was like, okay, well, this is going to end pretty soon, this whole scaling debate, because anytime someone starts censoring, and you know, Roger cites this. He says his biggest regret is not fighting harder against the censorship. And my initial thing when I saw it all was like, if you start censoring, things kind of already, people rebel, and then things kind of, it was obvious. There are even posts on the top of the subreddit calling for Thamos to leave, right? What excited me, actually, what really got me back into, oh my God, I think Bitcoin can actually work again, was Craig Wright's presentation in Arnhem. Okay. And if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to watch it. But the reason why I'm bringing it up is because there's a reason why I think Craig Wright came back into the space. And the first thing he talked about was the small world nature of the network. That was the first thing he talked about. And he's been hammering it home ever since. He then went to the Bitcoin Cash fork happened at the Satoshi Vision conference. What was he focused on? The small world nature of the network, right? And everyone keeps ignoring it. They keep either pretending like it's not true. They keep pretending like he's just techno babbling. And then they go, well, if it is a small world network, it's just because his arguments are wrong and all this other stuff. And the network, he's not actually mapping the network and blah, blah, blah. And then now it's like, well, it probably is a small world network, but like, who cares? But there's a reason why he brought that up. And it's because it enables an entirely new network to form inside of Bitcoin. And the only reason why that's possible is because of the inherent economics of the system. It's like if we were to take humanity and we go, well, what's the best way to get humanity to work the right way? We would all say, well, capitalism is the best way to do that. And so I actually think Bitcoin found a way through capitalism to make a better network than the internet. And so you're now talking about hardware-based mesh networks. You're thinking as if the internet is the same thing as Bitcoin. And this is, again, the very first thing that Craig Wright was focused on trying to hammer home in everyone's head was that we are not the internet. In fact, he said specifically, and this should appeal to just about every single person in Bitcoin Cash, he said DARPA wished they created this network, but they didn't. And that's 100% true when you actually look into what he means by a small network, look into why Bitcoin is a smaller network. And so you're trying to convince me that the solution to get what we want is to go back to this mesh network type thing. But I'm telling you, there's a potential to create an entirely new network. And it is entirely possible to enable use cases not possible on the internet today. So you're saying, like, why would an ISP ever get involved in Bitcoin? Why would we replace an ISP? I'm telling you because there's more profit motivation for them to do so in this new paradigm of what the Bitcoin network is capable of growing to be. So this is everyone is still thinking the wrong way. And so everyone can be like, well, Craig is full of shit or whatever else. Take just his thing about small world networks, look into it. There's quite a few books you can read that have nothing to do with Craig Wright, and you can come away with it with the exact belief that, or understanding, not belief, that Bitcoin is a small world network. And then you can then extrapolate from that and think, okay, well, if we're capable of a network like this, what can we do as that scales and as that grows? And Craig's argument is that's Metanet. And so that's really where we're at. That's where I'm at in my, so.
And I think it's okay to follow that path. I think it's okay to focus on that and believe that. I think there's another argument to be made for people who are specifically looking to do P2P cash. There's a reason for BCH to exist.
There's not. No, there's not.
There is, because if you look at BTC and BSV, you guys are, like I said yesterday in chat, both ends of the same scale. Neither of you are simply focused on P2P cash.
No,
you're wanting to monetize.
I'm not saying that. That's not
you
true.
Guys, you're wanting to monetize data storage, retention of data
through the use of peer-to-peer cash.
P2P cash is just you don't need to tokenize it to do that.
You need Bitcoin to make Metanet work. You need the underlying coin for this thing to work.
BCH is specifically focused on what if I were handing you a fiat bill or a cash bill, right? To focus on that and only that.
So is Bitcoin SV.
I disagree. I think that's all you can really say.
But you guys can keep making that argument.
I think BSV should exist. I really do, because I'm going to watch it. I'm going to see what happens. I think we're all going to learn something from it.
I'm telling you, there's one Bitcoin, and that's what's going to happen. There's going to be one Bitcoin at the very end of this. There's not going to be BCH. There's not going to be BSV.
The consolidation of miners towards the most profitable chain. Of course. Yeah, that's eventually going to happen. Well, here's the thing. There's always going to be different variations of altcoins, because there's always going to be people born thinking they can do it better. And they're going to create these things forever and ever and ever until they're proven wrong. So there's always going to be a subsection of altcoins. Always. There's going to be more Connors born 200 years from now. I can do this better. He's going to start his own node up, bring on some of his friends, and he's got his own thing. But there will be a natural, consolidation of the bigger miners towards the chain that offers most, right? So the Facebook of
so I'll address the altcoin thing. Every altcoin's value proposition only exists because Bitcoin isn't capable or is not committed to scaling. So there's not one altcoin that you could tell me about that Bitcoin can't do on its own, and that Bitcoin doesn't actually provide a better user experience because of its ability to scale. There's not.
For sure. They found their little niche. They found their little window of opportunity, and
they took this idea that blockchain was new, which it's not. It's not new whatsoever. And by the way, there's one person that's been saying that, Craig Wright. Okay, so again, I will go to bat for the guy because I actually believe he's very intelligent.
You say that we harp on the guy and we're totally focused on the guy, but most of your belief system seems to be that he's disputing based on he's Satoshi.
I love tackling the anti-Craig Wright viewpoint because I think it's
all right. So don't get mad when we say, look, he seems to be about bull. He seems to be full of shit.
We're 2 hours.
You're totally focused on him.
I can't bring him up. We're 2 hours in.
I'm just saying, don't get mad at us for focusing on him when a large portion of your belief is based on what you think of him.
Well, okay, but this isn't a belief. This is a statement of fact that blockchain.
To you, of course, it's an opinion.
Listen to me. Blockchain. I will be right. I will get the book. I will get the book, and I will show you that someone named Peter Wehner in 2005 described how to make an electronic cash using a digital
Connor,
But hang on.
Maybe he is Satoshi, okay? I don't know, but let's go back to the edits that he's done to previous websites.
Hang on. Let me finish my point because every altcoin says we have a value proposition because we're doing X with the blockchain. Every altcoin has no value proposition because the blockchain isn't what made Bitcoin valuable. The economics of the system is what made Bitcoin work. And that's what makes the small world network. It's what makes the entire thing completely separate from what we see as valuable with the internet. So this is the problem with the way everyone is thinking, that there's going to be multiple currencies, there's going to be whatever else. The value proposition of all these other altcoins is just, well, we put it into like a blockchain. And it's like, okay, but if we have one blockchain and you can do all your little niches inside of this one global ledger, then there's no value proposition. So is there going to be people trying to do stuff all the time? Sure. Are they going to have any sizable value proposition? There's people that today make private mesh networks that I
don't think you can speak in absolutes like that and determine the future.
But there's one internet. There's one internet. There's still people trying to make their own private mesh networks, but there's still one internet. And that's what's going to happen. That's what we want in Bitcoin SV. It's what I don't think people in Bitcoin Cash really are. That's their goal. Their goal isn't to think that big, which is fine because you keep saying, well, we just want to be peer-to-peer cash. I'm telling you, it's all part of Bitcoin. It's always been part of Bitcoin. So my problem with trying to distinguish, like, well, you're focused on cash, we're focused on storage. I'm saying all of this is possible with Bitcoin from the very beginning. And that's what bothers me, is that because I think that, somehow I am one of X of insults, right? And that's really the root problem, is that you think that there's going to be all these other coins. It's like, no, I'm saying Bitcoin does all this, and it will do all this as long as we all commit to making it do that. And that's what I think our goal should be. Our goal should be to increase the value proposition of Bitcoin SV so much that we bring every other miner inside of Bitcoin.
I agree. I've seen too many humans though in this life to think that everyone's always going to be on the same page. There's always going to be a subset of people that they think that they can do it better, and they will try.
So I think what makes Bitcoin most valuable is the censorship resistance. Actually, I think you said before that it was the economics of it, and I think it's the censorship resistance. And I mean, part of that is a lot of people running their own nodes. And so, sorry, I just wanted to just kind of backtracking a little bit. But
the economics are inherently what make it censorship resistant.
Let's go to institution. What do we think about institution coming in?
Hand. Because this is the other thing come up that John Fukeball loved to politicize the permissionless term during the fork. The only thing that makes Bitcoin censorship resistant is that there's an incentive to include a transaction. So if there's 3 miners and 2 of the miners are trying to censor me, the other one's going to say, well, fuck it, I'm going to take the fee. So the censorship resistance is the inherent part. The economics are the only reason why it is censorship resistant.
Right. Yeah, I guess you could argue like that. Sure.
So yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things we could talk about, like provable, pseudo provable IDs. This was just spoken about yesterday, I think, somewhere. I forget. I don't have the link. What sort of system can you have if people aren't identifiable to some aspect? And it goes back to Shatter's talk about provable pseudo IDs, something like that.
Oh, okay. So I was actually expecting this to come up, that the permission minding.
I mean, I have no problem with it. It's on your guys' system, so it doesn't make any difference to me.
Sure. But that seems to come up. We should probably tackle
it. I mean, you could create a cartel based off of this if you have a group of people who are in cahoots talking to each other. They're like, hey, we're all part of this system. We outnumber anyone who's not currently. You have a mining cartel.
Yeah, you could. I agree that that's theoretically possible, but I don't actually think cartels exist. I don't think
it's not permission. That's not going to be no. There's no ID system. First of all, provable pseudo ID is an oxymoron. But there is no ID system that doesn't end up with someone being at the top, or
of course,
with it end up being permissionless.
It's a Stackelberg game. That's the term. That's what it is. There's always a leader, but then there's always followers trying to outcompete the leader. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I just think you guys got a lot to figure out. I mean, I don't wish any ill will on you guys.
But you know what I wish?
You're taking on too much.
I wish we're not. We're doing what Satoshi always. Satoshi wanted a Bitcoin that scaled.
He never said anything about data storage ever.
Why did he even? Okay, forget this.
Are you talking about when nodes get so big they're hosted by it was strictly dealing with P2P cash.
Data centers, word for word. That's what he said. But
yeah, data centers.
Why would he include not just the scripting system? Why would he include op return if he didn't think that it was going to be used for data storage? Why would he include op return?
I mean,
some data associated with P2P cash transactions. Come on, I mean, let's. I don't want to split hairs here. There's an obvious reason for a script and op return.
So why didn't he limit the size?
Hold on. I don't know. I think it was at a point where he didn't need to. I mean, originally Bitcoin itself wasn't limited as far as block size goes. Yeah, pull him in.
I think it would be great if we allowed market forces to determine all these things that we're talking about. That's all everyone on the Bitcoin SV side wants. That's it. So you can say how much you want to focus.
That's what's playing out, Connor. That's what's playing out. It's going to be one. It might be we both exist at the same time. It might be one of us gets killed off. It might not be. You guys don't have. I mean, I haven't seen any. I wish you well.
But my argument is just that everything that I'm saying is what Bitcoin was from the very beginning. I've yet to understand how I'm not thinking that way. And so I would prefer that instead of us all arguing, we were instead united under one Bitcoin. And I don't care what you guys do. I'm not going to force you to do anything. I'm just saying, from my perspective, man, it would be so much better. And I thought we had this with Bitcoin Cash. I really did. I really thought we did have this.
I did too. And something happened. And I was right there when it happened. I'll tell you after you're done. Sorry.
No, I agree. And we all have our opinions about how it went down. But all that I'm talking about, as far as I'm concerned, is a Bitcoin scaled to the globe, governed by market forces. I think we all would love that. And it would be so much better if that's Instead, when I go to the fucking local blockchain groups,
Yeah.
and I have to now tell them, oh, I'm not a Bitcoin Cash guy anymore. I'm a Bitcoin
Right.
SV guy.
Right. You change
see what
your
I mean?
gang colors.
It's ridiculous. I was already the crazy guy that liked Bitcoin Cash. And now I have to be like, all right, well, now I'm like this Bitcoin SV guy.
That's why I say I'm not a Bitcoin Cash maximalist anymore, man. I'm not picking gang colors. I just want P2P cash. Obviously, if BCH does something that fucks it up in my mind, I'm leaving. I'll do something else. I'll still strive for
You'll come to
peer-to-peer
us.
cash.
You'll come to us. I know you will. Yeah.
I won't go to you.
Probably not.
I won't go to BSV. Well, I don't know. That could change. I don't know. I'm not picking gang colors anymore. I'm done with that. I don't, what I want to ask is it okay that I see BCH as what I happen, the flavor of Bitcoin that I happen to like? Because the way I see it is, I think it's okay for you guys to see BSV as a flavor that you like.
No, I don't. I want to make one Bitcoin that is used by I think having one Bitcoin actually provides the most economic freedom to every person.
Yeah, it's going to kill you to want that and not have it. I wouldn't worry about something like that. I wouldn't even focus on something like that.
I think it's the end state of all three of our forks. It's the end state, unless one of us.
Oh, we're 100 years. We're 100 years.
One.
We're probably 100 years away from the Facebook that killed MySpace.
Sorry, but again, there's 3 Bitcoins right now. We all share the same hashing algorithm. One of them has to emerge by any sense of economics. One will emerge by the
no. See, that's not true, because if that were true, BSV would be kaput right now. It doesn't have anywhere near the hash that BCH or BTC does.
So maybe every single
it should just die. By that logic, it's done.
Maybe every other Bitcoin miner sees value proposition in the future of BSV. Otherwise, they would have killed it. And I think the Bitcoin Cash miners should have killed it from the very beginning if they didn't want it to grow to become anything.
How decentralized is BSV mining? I haven't actually checked.
You can't really kill the chain though. Like you can reorg it, but it's not going to kill it. Like as long as people are mining it, you're not going to kill a chain.
Well, you can if it falls under its own weight of size. If it comes to a point where BSV is so large, no one's but one guy maybe is hosting the data, people will leave BSV.
Yeah, well, you could make it economically unusable, but I see what you mean. Yeah. You could theoretically not kill it, but you can make it unusable for weeks.
I mean, you'd have to sustain your hash, and then you'd have to sustain your hash maliciously on the chain, and then you'd have to keep securing your own chain at the same time. And so like the whole narrative, like killing off a fork is just like a waste of money. Like that's what it is. Especially if you're like spending all this hash to reorg. Unless you think it's going to make your fork more valuable, then it might be worth it.
It could be.
Right. Market forces are going to determine if BSV lives or not, because at this point the mining is, as Connor even said, I'm not going to say centralized. It's pretty compact within a specific group of people.
But there's nothing guaranteeing them that spot. That's what Bitcoin was always supposed to be, is that there's nothing guaranteeing anybody at the top to hold that spot. And I bet there are some BTC miners that could come into Bitcoin SV and take the top spot tomorrow if they really wanted to. And that's
if it wasn't 40% less profitable to mine than BTC.
And again, that's why what every single person in Bitcoin SV should be focused on doing is making it more valuable than BTC.
Yeah, it's a race to utility. It's 100%. It's a race to utility. Now, what the free market determines valuable when it comes to what is utility, that's a whole different story. And that's where I think that you guys have it wrong. The data storage angle is, the immutable data storage angle is, in my opinion, not the path currently. That's not the world we live in.
That's fine. But again, to say there's no value proposition, there's 8,000. I don't know why I always use that word. My wife hates it. There's a numerous number of businesses that would love to have an immutable data storage where they don't have to keep records, because they're required to keep records today. That is a requirement by law in the US to keep records for 5 to 7 years. So to tell them, hey, by the way, maybe for example, EDI, perfect example. This is a great example, electronic data interchange. That's used in just about every industry possible today.
Yeah.
You can say, we can provide you the exact same service on top of Bitcoin. And by the way, it'll settle on chain. It'll be there forever. And you don't have to store it yourself. And by the way, it's a third of the cost. It's
tons of opportunity. That we begin to get into this self-sufficiency idea when it comes to corporations. What are they more likely to do? Are they going to rely on themselves or BSV?
No,
would
they're going to do whatever's cheaper. That's what
exactly. And right now, you could for the cost of uploading one, I think it's 100 megabytes. You could buy like 3 servers and just spread them out throughout hubs. I don't know. I don't know the math.
Yes. So I mean, you say the storage is going to get cheaper, but like all storage is going to get cheaper. Like not just like blockchain storage. All storage is going to get cheaper. So
of course,
it's going to have to follow more. So storage is going to be following Moore's law, but then the blockchain is going to have to be exponentially above Moore's law, cheap wise. And at that point, you're just, I mean, I don't know if miners will accept your transaction for how cheap that's going to be, because that's got to be like sub 0.01 Satoshi per byte. Like that's just ridiculously cheap.
Right.
So there's a couple of things. Number one, part of the reason why Bitcoin is so expensive to use today is because we spent 7 years probably not doing anything to make it scalable. So like all these arguments we're having today is because someone had to pick up starting in 2017 essentially, and there were people trying to do it sooner. But in August 2017, we now had to say, okay, finally we've done this thing that made a lot of sense, but now we have to focus on getting it to where Satoshi wanted it, and we need to get it as highly scaled as possible. So we wasted all this time when we could have making the scalability of the blockchain cheaper than what it essentially is today.
Well, the idea comes in that it's cheap, it's larger, and by nature becomes more centralized. There's nuances here.
Stop saying the centralized thing.
No. What I'm saying, no. I'm sorry, Connor. I don't mean to offend. What I'm saying is,
I'm not offended.
What I'm saying is, there's this idea, this notion that the larger we go right now, right, if the time period isn't, kosher to what we want, there's a chance of it becoming very centralized because there's only a select few people who are willing to host this data, right? You guys got into the pruning talk earlier, and that alone, if you really deep dive into the pruning idea, you could end up in a situation where everyone prunes everything but their own data, and then what's the point of?
No, stop. Okay, so there's 2 problems, because again, the centralization thing keeps coming up. Centralization is the argument that monopolies exist in free markets. That's just not true. So monopolies do not exist without regulatory capture. That's a basic tenet of economics. There's no such thing as monopoly that exists as long as a free market exists. So the mining may become quote unquote centralized for as long as until someone else outcompetes them. As long as nothing is interjected to protect the top miner, then there's nothing that's ever going to make Bitcoin SV centralized. It will always be competitive. And as long as there are 3 competitors, we are okay. There will be more because we're talking about a global financial system, just like there are more than 3 banks today. But as long as there are 3 entities, we are okay. And you're going to say, well, they're all going to compete in a cartel and all this other stuff.
Well, here's the question, it's a side note. What's the likelihood that selfish mining gets a redefinition of that? People are only in it for the block rewards, and then they prune all the shit that they just mine.
So that's fine.
At a grand scale, I mean.
So I think that there's a value for immutable data storage. So maybe I'll start a business that takes in all the blocks.
Yeah, it's not going to be miners. It's going to be you that charges for access to that data that you're saying, I'm never going to delete. I get the business model.
What's wrong with that?
No, I don't. I think, like Collin said earlier, there's great opportunity in that. It's got nothing to do with the P2P cache, the simple P2P cache that I'm looking for. This is my problem with BSV and why I'm currently with BCH. And I'm going to stick. I mean, you're not understanding that.
Stop you from making the cash transactions ever. That's never going to stop on Bitcoin SV. No matter how much you want to think it's ever going to stop, it's never going to stop ever. You're always going to be able to make. In fact, we might make it cheaper than Bitcoin Cash because we're going to enable a market for data storage. So maybe the 1 Satoshi per byte arbitrary decision making of that's the fee will become lower on Bitcoin SV. And I bet it will. I bet it will become lower on Bitcoin SV than it will on Bitcoin Cash. I would bet money on that today, that's what happens. So your cash transactions will be prioritized, will be cheaper over any data storage, your transaction on Bitcoin SV will be cheaper than it will be on Bitcoin Cash, which means that we enable more economic freedom for the world than Bitcoin Cash will. I bet
Yeah,
that.
I mean that is a good point. Look, if Bitcoin SV ever becomes the de facto cryptocurrency, I'm going to be using it because there's a larger game at play where I want that P2P cash over centralized banks, the traditional banking system. I do eventually, if we have enough time, I want to get into industry and let me pull it up.
All right, so here's what I'll do. How about this? I'm gonna pour some more wine, and I'll give you. I'll go till 7:30 my time.
Yeah. I'm good with that. 15 more minutes.
All right,
Sure. Yeah. I've just been sitting back and enjoying. So.
Sorry, man. I didn't mean to.
No, you're good, man. You're good. Yeah, it's funny just rehashing a couple of the topics. It's fine.
I mean, everyone listening now should know that I'm just coming from a higher level. People have already commented, "You pour another drink." I will. I'm not looking to change people's minds. It's just you guys were talking about interesting things, and I wanted to kind of give maybe a more practical idea of it. Because I'm going to be honest, if BSV ends up winning the MySpace Facebook war that seems to be happening now, I'm going to use it. I'm just not going to be happy, right? Because of everything that's happening.
We're gonna enable things you never even thought possible. There's gonna be economies that we produce that you never even thought possible.
Chill it, bro. Chill that shit.
I think you will never have been happier in your life than when Bitcoin SV takes over the world. That's what I think will happen. Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. When Metanet on BCH?
Sorry,
when Metanet on BCH?
Yeah, if the argument is true in that we could still be focused purely on P2P cash, we could do Metanet on BCH, just like we could do Lightning Network.
Then the first thing you should do is increase the transaction size, which, as far as I know, Omri does not want to do. So I hope you somehow convince Omri, and you can tell me all you want that Omri doesn't control Bitcoin Cash. But if he doesn't agree to it, I don't think it's ever going to happen.
By the way, I get a message that said the transaction size are not bounded actually. So
Roger actually mined. Sorry, not Roger. Bitcoin.com mined a 97 kilobyte transaction we made actually. So that there does appear to be maybe one miner or so that has modified their software to allow bigger op return. I haven't tried in a long time, but I did do that a long time ago, and they mined my Bitcoin SV as Bitcoin transaction. I made that about 5,000 times in op return, and they mined it. That was nice of them. So you're right. I think there are some miners. I don't know if they're still doing it, but they appear to be allowing 97 kilobytes or the 99 kilobyte limit. I think that was enabled on Bitcoin SV. But if you want Metanet, you guys should allow an unbounded op return and an unbounded transaction size. And
I don't think the miners will want that specifically, just because, again, if you're going below 1 Satoshi per byte, it's them throwing away money basically. I hear that 1 Satoshi per byte at current prices is actually like too cheap for a lot of miners' operating costs right now. Obviously, the block reward helps with that, but going into the future, I mean, obviously, if Bitcoin value goes up, the 1 Satoshi per byte will be better.
Right.
But
if they're holding it. But then the question, Collin, comes up: what happens if there's ever a lull in data being uploaded to BSV? It becomes kind of a pyramid scheme at that point, because it's all about the maintenance of prior uploads, and there's no new economic contributions coming in.
Sure, yeah. I mean, because you don't pay to store the op returns on chain. That's a separate service. So yeah, it's not the miners.
Well, I agree.
Initial inclusion, yeah.
I agree that we should be focused on making sure that there is sustained transaction volume. And that's why I'm frustrated. That's why I think that's why we're all frustrated, is we had this unified core of big blockers. And now what's happened is I wake up and I see just a ton of shit talk about BSV every day. And I'm not saying it's one certain individual or anything like that, but then there's BSVers that are shitting on Bitcoin cashers.
Yeah, it's just fun.
It's this all over the place. And instead of now having a unified big block vision for making Bitcoin the global network of the world, we now are dealing with this, which is unfortunate, because I spent a lot of time having local meetups. I spent a lot of time trying to get businesses onboarded to Bitcoin Cash. and now I have to start over with a new Bitcoin. So that is frustrating for me, and it's frustrating to go on Reddit and see what are that the accusation is that anyone that is on BSV is a shill, which is of course a ridiculous statement. It's just that none of us are on Reddit, and that's the root. I've stopped using Reddit.
I stopped using Reddit. It's such a shit show. I mean, I created RBTC. I transitioned to RBTC specifically for Bitcoin style talk, right? And I don't even go to it anymore. I don't. Look, it's all what I want is to argue with people and for logic to, if someone says something logical, for others to give quarter to that logic. That's all all I want. You know, it's, and you don't get that. I mean, we can see it in the chat right now. There's some cool people in your YouTube chat that are making good points. You could see some, it doesn't matter what you say. They're just going to say, you know, fuck you. You're, you know, BSV is a shit. And that's what Reddit is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, props to you guys for supporting Connor. He needs it. Don't wish harm on me. But
again, I hope nothing more than to do this. And so I understand, as I'm sure you guys understand, Collin, I know you understand this. If you put yourself out there in any capacity, there's criticism. But what bothers me the most is that there's so much Judas shit thrown at me, and there's so much implication that I don't know what I'm talking about, which is fine. But I would prefer nothing more than to sit here and actually tell you that I think I know what I'm talking about. I would love to be proven wrong about what I'm talking about, but I actually believe this stuff. I had a great conversation with Ryan Charles when we were in London, and he actually, I think, put it perfectly that everyone thinks he's crazy, and they refuse to accept he might know what he's talking about. Or
I see it as capitulation. I don't even want to get into that because I can't speak for him. One thing I will say, since getting into Bitcoin, I've never been wrong, or cryptocurrency. Never been wrong on any high level major point on anything. So
you've never been wrong, is that what you're saying?
I've got a history of being right.
I gotta be worried then. Should I be worried?
I think no, because if BSV takes a shit, you just come right over to BCH and we're good. We create some memes together against whoever the perceived enemy is at that point.
Those were the days.
Good deal. Well, all right. So I'll give 10 minutes. I mean, is there any? I feel like I've spoken a lot. Do you have critiques of anything?
No, I don't. I think it went very well. I mean, look, I know we all have different opinions, different ideals. I think there's something larger at play here where we just want a certain amount of freedom for people, and P2P Cash allows that freedom to people, right? So far, there's people even with usernames called unbanked, right? There's a reason for that. There's this whole
fully.
Samsung Mao bullshit about Bitcoin wasn't for people that make less than $2 a day. I don't agree with. I think humans need this, and it's going to come, and whoever wins, wins. But right now, I'm happy where I am.
Very good. Very good. You don't want to be united again against Samson Mao? That's not what you want? You don't want to be united?
I've never been united with Samson Mao. He looks like someone I would punch if I ever hung out with him.
No, I get you saying, Connor. Yeah, I mean, I think like at the down and dirty of it, BCH and BSV still do have those ideals that like made Bitcoin what it is today. And it is sad we have two different versions, but somebody wanted a fork, and it's up to whoever's talking is who wanted a fork away from the other one. And so it is sad, but we get to see almost the extreme block size being played out, and then kind of the more optimized getting played out. And then we'll see who wins, and hopefully it's over sooner than later. But yeah, again, I think we all kind of stand for the same thing. It's just a matter of who thinks what is centralized at this point, I suppose. So.
Sure. Yeah. That's fair. I hate the centralization thing. I'll rail on that again. I think I hate that comes up all the time. I don't like it, but I get it. I get the viewpoint for sure.
That's the way it is for now. It might change. if there's one thing I would want to leave with, it's I don't want to be so blunt, but I kind of do. Is fuck institution.
Jeez,
give me.
You kept saying that. What do you mean by that?
Give us 1 million people using. I'll say Bitcoin Cash in this instance. Give us 1 million people using Bitcoin Cash between each other, and institution will follow. We don't need to chase institution. Institution's going to come. They've always, if you ever look, they're always late to the game because they're always just dipping their toes into most things until they see the right chance to jump on something. So fuck institution. Let's get 1 million people using this. Those people will determine the value between the free market will determine the value proposition between whatever token we're talking about. And we bypass the banks altogether. Look, the biggest thing that's going to come to freeing up humans is not even P2P cash. P2P cash is just a precursor to what comes next, which I'm not going to get into right now, but it's the largest thing that's ever going to change our lives.
So can I challenge? What is an institution? Like, what do you mean by that? Like that's such a vague thing.
That's a good question. I see people, when AOL or Amazon or, when these big corporations, when are they going to utilize? Fuck them. Fuck the big corporations. 1 million people using the P2P cash amongst themselves, and we fucking win. They can either adapt or die.
I think that line of reasoning is exactly why Bitcoin SV will completely outpace Bitcoin Cash.
And I think the line of reasoning that you need them is why you won't. They exist solely because we exist. Corporations exist because they think there's something to sell to us or some service to provide to us. They are not. They're service providers. They're not.
What are you? This is commie stuff you're pulling on me? What are you talking about?
It's not commie stuff. I'm talking about people. I'm talking about free market, the people.
Corporations are people, man. Corporations are groups of people.
I'm just saying. Look, I have a corporation myself. I'm just saying, fuck institution. Stop begging them to come in and save us with some, high dollar valuation or a big purchase of Bitcoin or whatever. Fuck them. Let's use it amongst ourselves. If they see the value, they'll come in.
All right, fair enough. I'll respect that. Well, I will end this. I thanks for doing this, both of you.
Yeah, man, thank you.
We will stay united.
Smoke another beer, mate. I love that. I'm stealing that.
We'll stay united against the 300 kilobyte UASF crowd.
Not against it, for it. 300 KB.
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
300 kilobyte blocks.
Good point. All right, cool. Well,
accelerationism. Thanks, Connor.
Connor, man, thanks for the pleasant time.
Yeah, have a good one, guys.
Later, guys.
See ya.